Hello there everyone. Yes, I'm in my avatar form today. I have been exhausted. I've been having a lot of insomnia from pain lately because of the change of seasons. So I didn't feel like being an absolute spud on camera today. So hopefully you like my little VTuber. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different today. I don't typically read Reddit stories on my channel. It's just not the kind of channel I am. But in this case, I heard a Reddit story while going through my TikTok this morning that aligns very well with what I typically do on YouTube. It is all about a disabled person being treated horribly by able-bodied people in the wilds. Unfortunately, this is something that happens more often than you would think. Sometimes even the able-bodied people around you don't even notice it happening to you. So I wanted to go ahead and go through it. Now, this is not straight from Reddit because unfortunately Reddit is having a little bit of a crash crisis right now, so it's coming from this Tumblr instead today. And the title is "Entitled Mother Lets Her Kids Steal My Blind Cane." Now, there is a little preface I need to go through before we start reading this, and that is the fact that the poster of this story has gone blind gradually as the result of a fungus, which is absolutely horrific, and I wanted to go over a couple of things dealing with that before we read the story. First thing you need to understand, because a lot of even disabled people can misunderstand some of the language the poster uses in this story. She is very newly blind in the story. She's only been blind for a year when she posted this, and she was not disabled for a majority of her life. When a lot of people who have gone their entire lifetime able-bodied and with absolutely no problems getting around, typically speaking, once one of their senses is taken from them or they become in some way disabled, it's an adjustment period. It takes quite a long time for them to not be depressed, for them to not feel completely othered. They're not used to going around in public and having people treat them differently for something that they can't control. And that is a really difficult thing to have to deal with. I myself was technically born disabled, but it didn't manifest in a way where I needed my mobility aids until I was in high school. I had not been like super sporty, but I was a kid who enjoyed playing basketball and running track. So going from that to needing a cane, then crutches, and then to be in a wheelchair was difficult. I wanted to make sure people understood that because she does mention it being like absolute hell and stuff a couple times, and it does take quite a while when you're newly disabled to get past that internalized ableism toward yourself. And I think that a lot of internalized ableism in the disabled community could be diminished if the outside world was simply more accessible to us, but alas, it isn't. Very few public spaces are completely accessible, even when they try to say that they are, and that is hard. The other thing I wanted to mention, because she says it very quickly, is exactly how this happened. This girl survived Hurricane Katrina. If you are not from the United States, Hurricane Katrina was quite possibly the worst natural disaster that we've ever been through. It was completely horrific. It happened many years ago, but we are still, in some ways, struggling through the effects of it. That's how powerful this thing was. It wiped out entire towns. It killed tons of people. It killed tons of pets. It was horrific. And she decided to take it upon herself to be a volunteer cleaning up some of the sites, which is admirable, beautiful, wonderful. We need more people with a heart like hers. However, her doing that is what caused her blindness, and I can understand feeling kind of jaded about that. The fact that you did something kind and you were rewarded by having something taken from you, that's difficult. I want to explain exactly what her cause of blindness is so that people can understand it, so that you don't think this story is too far-fetched. So she has something called histoplasmosis. This is an infection caused by breathing in spores of a fungus, often found in bird and bat droppings. People usually get it from breathing in these spores when they become airborne during demolition or cleanup projects. So that aligns perfectly with how she says she contracted it. She was at cleanup sites, so that was already a breeding ground for this stuff. And then demolition, while technically she wasn't taking wrecking balls to stuff, the buildings were demolished by this hurricane. So I just wanted to make sure that you understood how this happened, because she doesn't go into much detail explaining it. So time to read now. So a bit of backstory. I am a 28-year-old woman who just recently went fully blind. When I was a teenager, I volunteered with my local youth group to help rebuild Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina, and while down there I picked up a fungal parasite called histoplasmosis that over a decade migrated to my eyes and slowly caused blindness. That had to be so difficult, and I truly do feel for her. Like, the fact that it was gradual has to make it even harder, because she knew it was coming and she slowly noticed herself losing her sight over time. That's tough. I've been totally blind for about a year now, so I'm pretty new to it, but I digress. When I first went blind, I barely left the house and I was afraid to go out in public. I felt like everyone was staring at me, and in all honesty, I barely knew what I was doing. The transition had been difficult and I didn't have any support group to teach me. One day my husband asks if I can take an Uber down to the bank to deposit a rent check, and I reluctantly agree. While out, he messages again and reminds me that we were out of a few crucial groceries. There was a Walmart grocery literally across the street from the bank, so I figure everything in life is an experience and I'll have to learn to shop alone eventually, so why not? I'm going to pause there for a second to discuss what we just read, because a lot of people, especially who are not part of the disabled community, are probably going to be pretty feisty with her husband because he's making her do this when he knows she's really struggling. Now, we do not know the ins and outs of this woman's home life or her marriage life, so we can't fully decide ourselves exactly why this happened. However, there's some aspects to it that I agree with and some that I don't. I do understand, if this is where the husband was coming from, that if he noticed his wife was really depressed and that she wasn't leaving the house, that he might have been like, I want her to get out, I want her to learn to be more independent so she's a little happier overall. However, this probably wasn't the best way to do this. I mean, the fact that she said she has no support group to teach her how to get along as a blind person, he could have easily helped her find this, whether it be online through Zoom or something, or in person. There's always resources like this. And although computers and phones have been able to aid in blind accessibility for a very long time now, very well over a decade, there's different apps that will read your screen to you, that will read your text, that will read every single letter you're typing in and read your whole sentence back to you. Even that takes some getting used to if you've never used it before. He should have helped her learn all this stuff or find a support group. Also, while it is important that she learn to be more independent and how to get around on her own so she doesn't feel like she's just a layabout, he probably should have waited until he was done at work and taken her there so she wasn't completely alone. It's scary the first time you have to go out alone already once you're using a new mobility device. I can't imagine what it's like when you've never done it before and your first time out alone is also your first time out. Holy shit. Everything was fine at first, and I was only grabbing a few things, so I didn't need a cart. I was using my cane, and with what little echolocation skills I had at the time, I was able to get around, but I was still bumping into things as we blind tend to do sometimes. My cane suddenly hit something a bit softer, and I figured maybe I had whacked someone's leg and apologized. This is something that can happen with a myriad of disability equipment. It can happen, like with her, with a blind accessibility cane. It has also happened to me with crutches and with both wheelchairs I've had. I've had a manual wheelchair and now I have a mobility scooter. And what people don't seem to understand is when I sit there telling people, hey, excuse me, I'm coming through, I'm right behind you, they don't always move, and I'm gonna hit you. Just like her, she couldn't see, so of course she was gonna hit someone if they weren't paying attention. And when I was in my manual wheelchair, from where I was sitting, did not have a good view of how far away I was from people's ankles. So if they didn't move right away, I usually crashed into them because it was too hard to gauge. In the scooter, I'm able to see them a little bit clearer, but there's still the problem of I have no control over my brake. It doesn't brake immediately. It takes it a few seconds. So if you don't move out of the way in time when I say, excuse me, get out of the way, move, you're going to be hit by me and it's not going to feel well. Please be aware of your surroundings, and especially if someone asks you to move, get out of the way. Cue entitled kid and entitled mother. Me, shoot, I'm so sorry. Entitled mother, hey, you just hit my son. Me, I'm so sorry, ma'am, I didn't see him there. EM begins yelling, how could you not see him? He's clearly right there. Now, I'm fully blind, but I don't wear sunglasses, mostly because I can't afford a good UV blocking pair. But also, I'm not ever looking for pity or to play the part of a generic blind person. That's a perfect example of the stuff I was mentioning at the start of this video, that she has some internalized ableism since she's still new to all this. So I don't think there's such a thing as playing a part of a typical blind person. I have a very, very close friend who's totally blind. Now, she is one of the ones whose eyes do this. They just kind of dart back and forth and stuff a lot involuntarily. She can't do anything about it because of the form of blindness that she has. She does not wear sunglasses, though. What people also don't understand about the blind community is a lot of people assume that they just wear sunglasses because their eyes dart around like that. This isn't necessarily the case for everyone, though. For some people, I'm sure they're subconscious about it, but for most, it's because even though you can't see, you are still sensitive to light. You know how when you go outside after you've been in your house all day and the sun hits and you're just like, ow, my eyes kind of hurt? That times a million every time you're near light. It's just, some of them are a lot more sensitive. And so they wear UV blocking sunglasses to make life a little bit more bearable for themselves. Not every blind person has their eyes move around involuntarily, though. Blindness is a spectrum just like any other disability. So no two people are going to be exactly the same. You could line up 5 different blind people and their eyes are all going to be doing something different. So also remember that there are varying degrees of being blind. My friend, for example, can see color and nothing else. So she asks that when you visit her or hang out with her, you wear something nice and bright so that she can see you. So yeah, remember, it's a spectrum. I just want to be treated like a normal person, but I do understand her confusion as blindness is a spectrum, like I said. So I tried to calmly explain. Me, ma'am, I'm blind. I can't see anything, let alone your son. That's why I have to use the cane so I can get around without... She cuts me off. If you're blind, why aren't you wearing big sunglasses? Guys, we live in the age of the internet. All the information and knowledge in the world is available on Google if you look for it. Be a part of disabled spaces. Actually learn before just deciding things like this. My goodness. Now, as a blind person, I get a lot of stupid questions, but I understand a lot of them are just people who don't know better, so I try to happily answer as many as I can. Some people are like this. I am not one of those, and a majority of disabled people I know are not one of those either. A lot of us do get very offended and very annoyed if you ask us questions about our disability in public, especially if you don't know us. I don't understand to this day why so many able-bodied people think it's appropriate to approach a disabled person who is just out and about doing business as usual and ask them very private and personal questions about why they're disabled, how disabled they are, what exactly is going on with their body. Like, that's totally inappropriate. I always tell people, hey, think of it this way. If you were just coming out of the doctor from a prostate exam or your pap smear and some random person in the lobby stood up, blocked your way and said, hey, I want to know every single detail about what happened in there. Tell me exactly what it smelled like, felt like, looked like. Like, can you imagine how weird and uncomfortable that would be? For a lot of people, their disability is extremely private. If you're not going to sit here and ask random strangers about their entire medical history, don't ask a disabled person about why they're disabled. And I've even had people, once I explained that, go and explain either their entire medical history to me or talk about their family member or friend's disability and then expect that I somehow owe them information about mine. That's not how this works. You voluntarily divulged that information to me. I don't have to respond to it with my own story. If a disabled person is not happily volunteering information about their disability to you, just don't ask them questions about it. Now back to the sunglasses thing. Me, those are really expensive, around $200 for a good pair, and I really don't need any inside. EM, you're not blind, you're faking it. Here is where my blood starts to boil. I can't think of any reason someone would want to pretend to be blind. It's an actual hell. More of the internalized ableism. And nothing pisses me off more than when someone calls me a liar when I'm not. Just as I'm about to respond, I feel a tug, and before I blink, I realize the little demons want to snatch my $100 cane from my hands. For those of you who don't understand, that's like if you're shopping and suddenly the power goes out and you can't see a single light. Without my cane, I can barely move at all without crashing into anything. This was absolutely disgusting, and another thing that I've discussed on my YouTube channel and on my TikTok several times before. Never touch, especially not take, but also never touch someone's mobility device for any reason. It's the same as grabbing a random stranger by the hand and just pulling them around. It's an extension of that person's body as long as they're using it. Not to mention, if you got it through your health insurance, it takes a long time. My grandma needed a wheelchair and it took over 6 months for her to get it because she had to have it fully funded by her medical insurance, and they didn't want to. And if you're paying out of pocket, chances are it was so expensive you can't afford to replace it. I've had several instances in the past where I am at an event or something, or just out and about in public, and there either is no disabled toilet whatsoever, or the only disabled toilet that there is out of order, or someone else is using it or something. And I've had people graciously offer to watch my chair while I use one of the normal stalls. I will always refuse. Even if you're a family member or a friend, I will not go into that stall without my wheelchair, because the fact of the matter is, I don't know who I can trust with it. I don't know who is going to just take off with it, because as you can see from the story, people do disgusting things like that all the time, and you can easily break this equipment if you don't know how to deal with it. And even if I trust you yourself with it, I can't trust that someone won't just come up behind you, snatch it, and be faster than you can react. So this is just horrible, honestly. This is something she could have called security for, and hopefully they would have done something, but being that this is Walmart, maybe not. My voice gets shaky and I begin to panic. Please give that back, I really do need it. EM, no you don't, you liar. My son deserves to play with this more than you. You are never, ever entitled to someone else's property, regardless of what you think. And it's frightening to me that it sounds like the son is actually very young in this story. So I can't completely fault him. I fault the mother for allowing him to behave like this. This kind of boys will be boys entitlement is what ends up creating men who are abusive in the future. Hopefully, this kid grows up and grows out of this and becomes a kind person who realizes this was wrong. But who knows? I hear her shuffle away and my expensive cane cracking into metal displays and such as they leave. I start crying and waving my arms in front of me to grab onto something, anything, and end up crashing and falling into a center aisle display, making a loud scene. That could have caused serious, grievous injury to this woman. Crashing into a center aisle display, those things are massive, in case you don't know. Massive, massive, massive. And depending on what was on it and how she fell, she could have cracked ribs, she could have broken bones. Any horrors could have befallen her. Not to mention how terrifying it must have been to crash into something like that and not know how to get away from it. Without fail, I somewhat curl into a ball and cry. I'm alone in public and in the dark, and I had no idea what to do. I don't blame her at all. That's absolutely horrible. Suddenly, I feel a hand on my shoulder and a man's voice, we'll call him AG for awesome guy, asks if I'm okay and to stay right there. I appreciate the way he went about this, because this is one of those things that is a form of ableism a lot of people don't understand. And most people who actually do this, their hearts are in the right place. They mean well, but you need to let disabled people know in some way that you are going to do something to help them. When people just dart in front of my wheelchair to grab the door for me or something, I usually have to pump the brakes, and this can cause injury to me or to that person, or I can crash into the door because I wasn't expecting it. Likewise, if I'm trying to pull something off of a high shelf or something and I don't know someone's going to dive in front of me, same thing can happen. So while he didn't specifically tell her, do I have your consent to help you, he did let her know he was there, and he let her know what he was about to do. Always make sure that you somehow get permission from the disabled person before helping them, or that you let them know what's about to go down. I do, but begin to at least sit up and listen. This man must have been tall and built like a tank because his footsteps sounded like a giant, and I felt a suction of wind when he took off. Did Chris Evans just rescue her? Maybe about 30 or 40 feet away, I hear this loud bellowing like an angry lion and a loud crash. Then before I know it, the man is back and helping me to my feet. He takes my hand and puts my cane into my palm and helps me pick up the items I dropped when I fell into the display. So, are we allowed to democratically vote in the next Superman? Because I nominate Giant Man in Walmart. Me wiping tears from my cheeks. Thank you so much. I didn't know how to handle that. AG, don't worry about it. Some people are just monsters. True. This guy restored my faith in humanity and even helped me finish shopping and helped me out of the store. As we're leaving, I can hear the familiar screeching of EM, something about AG grabbing the cane and pulling it hard, flinging her little devil child into a shopping cart. I don't know if she was exaggerating or not, but that would explain the crash I heard. Honestly, given the care and energy coming from this woman, I bet you anything it was an exaggeration. He probably ran up, made a scary noise so the kid was caught off guard, ripped the cane out of his hand, and then either the mom threw herself into a shopping cart or he just kind of gently shoved him away and she acted like he almost killed her kid. It's easy to feel alone in a world without sight, but even through the sheer terror of being stripped of my cane, at least I know now that there are people willing to stand up for me when I need it. Now, the edit at the end of this was really unfortunate, and it showcases a terrible thing that's been manifesting on the internet lately. And that is the fact that with the rise in people talking about disabilities on TikTok and YouTube, there have been some people who are disability fakers. I'm not going to deny that. There are some people who fake it for likes and views. It's just the way the world works. People will fake anything, just like, we have stuff like people faking cancer and stuff like that one woman in Australia for money. What you need to remember, though, is two things. One is that for every single person who's faking a disability for some kind of attention online, there's at least 100 more who are being honest about it. Unfortunately, because of how horrific it is to lie about something like that, the liar is the one who's gonna get all of the attention, which is what they want. The other thing I want you to remember is that, like I said before, no two disabilities are exactly the same. I recently saw people talking about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and the fact that it manifests differently in everyone. Some people have extreme hypermobility, some people do not. Some people have extreme pain every day, some people do not. Some people need a wheelchair, some people do not. And this goes for every single disability on the planet. Everyone has it manifest inside of them in a different way. You can't treat one person with a disability the same way as another one, even if they have the same diagnosis. And so you can't determine as an outsider whether someone is faking or not. The only way to know for sure that someone's faking a disability is if they come out and they admit it. I don't even think it's right to listen to these people's family members. Some people are like, oh, well, so-and-so's sister said that she's faking, so it must be true. You don't know the ins and outs of that person's family life. They could be faking it, or that sister may just have a strained relationship with that person and is trying to get them in trouble because they want them canceled. You don't know. Never ever assume someone is telling the truth or lying about their disability. Even if you suspect that they might be lying, you don't have to say anything about it. Just move on and don't watch that person's content anymore. It's as simple as that. And once again, I'll remind you that even if the person is online, they are allowed to say as little or as much about their disability as they want. I've mentioned on my channel several times that I will only go into so much detail about why I'm disabled because I frankly don't think it's anyone's business, and it involves very private parts of my body that I don't want to discuss with millions of people across the globe. That doesn't mean that I'm faking or that anyone in my shoes is faking. It just means that there's some parts of our disability that are private and we want kept to ourselves. I think there's this weird idea on the internet now, because people share so much of themselves, that everyone has to. You don't. You can still tell as little or as much about your life as you want, and remember that even if you watch someone's content every day, you see maybe 5% of their entire life. You only see what we want to show you. So here's what her edit said. Edit. because of the sheer overwhelming amount of people asking, if you're blind, how are you typing? Wow. I'll first answer with my fingers, and secondly, I'm using a screen reader called Narrator that reads the screen. Whenever my cursor or finger is over the screen, it reads. When I type a letter, it reads. Guys, just like Google it or something. True, and that has been around for tons of time now. Whew, wow. Well, hopefully the people who needed to hear this story have heard it and learned something from it. I know that ableism is not black and white. A lot of ableism happens simply from ignorance and people not realizing what they're doing is ableist, but some of it is deliberate and malicious. So hopefully you learned a little something from this video. And as always, do something that makes you happy today, as long as you're causing harm to none, and I'll see everyone in the next video. Bye.